So this is our pavement management and paving plan, March 20th, 2025. We use a company named StreetScan that comes in every few years, 3 to 5 years, and they scan all the roads in town. Here, I'll go to the next slide so you can see the actual vehicle, which I think this is mounted on a Honda Fit. I think the latest proposal they just gave me recently showed I think it's a Subaru Crosstrek now they're using for their scan vehicle. But our last data collection through StreetScan was July 2021. They drive around town for about 5 days, collect imagery of all 103.5 miles of roadway. And then about 5 to 6 months later, they process all the data and delivered it to us. So you can see the vehicle it's got a roof-mounted GPS. It's got a 360 cam, just like Google Street View captures. And then off the back, they have a 3D camera. And the 3D camera captures, oh, can you guys not, oh, can you see my mouse if I'm using this screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
sorry. So I was using my sneak preview screen and you can't see my mouse. So yeah, they have a GPS mounted here, 360 cam on the top, just like Street View, and then these 3D cameras off the back that capture all sorts of any kind of deformations and imagery. So I'll go to the next slide for that. So these are all the different kind of roadway deformations they have. That you've got, bumps and surface distortions, potholes, patches. You've got your longitudinal cracks, your transverse cracks. Then there's like block cracking where there's larger failures. And then this is the worst is alligator cracking. That's the curse where the road is going to completely fall apart in one more winter. And it even detects stuff like roads that we may have already crack sealed to prevent additional deformation. So they run through all the roadways, they scan them all, they run them through sort of an algorithm and a proof check, and then they rank them for a pavement condition index, abbreviated PCI, of 0 to 100. So then they give us back this pavement condition index for the entire town of Amherst. And they sort of categorize them into bins. So, 0 to 10 is a failed road, 10 to 25 is serious failure, 25 to 40 is poor, 40 to 55, 20 to 25 to 40 is very poor, 40 to 55 poor, 55 to 70 is in fair condition, 70 to 85 is good, and then 85 to 100 is excellent. So we get that kind of ranking for all our roads, and then they can color code it. This is just a couple of examples to start with. So this is, looking at this road, looks like it just got paved less than a year ago, or if not even more recently. So that's an example of a road in excellent condition. This is a road in good condition. It's been crack sealed once, but you got some more cracks and a little bit of deformation forming over here, but the ride quality still is nice. It still looks like a nice smooth road. This next one, this jumps us down to a very poor condition, and you can see that's what we call alligator cracking. It kind of looks like an alligator skin. It's starting to rut and deform, and that's getting pretty close to getting moving rapidly towards failure with a couple of more winters. And this is just completely failed road. You can just see it's a patchwork of patches and holes and potholes, and the potholes form next to the other potholes, and this road is just in complete failure mode. So those are just some examples of like the different conditions. So yeah, once they scan the whole town, they give us the results, and this is what they deliver for us. So this is from 2021 when they did the scan. We had an average PCI of 65, which is a pretty decent score. And using our methods and unit costs, they estimated a backlog of 49 million, which is a big, scary number. But they also break it down to like how many roads are very poor, how many are in the poor range, which in 2021 was a lot. And then they sort of, break it down by percentage of good, fair, poor, failed. So we were pretty good. We didn't have any serious or failed roads in 2021. But then they also, on top of this, they also provide a map. And so there's the 2021 PCI map. And you kind of look for all the red sections, and those are like our our really poor or our serious or very poor roads. And there weren't that many, but there were a lot in this orange range and the yellow ranges all throughout town. So then we kind of fast forward 5 years later. Um, and here's our current status. Our 2025 average PCI is a 62. Um, we added some less expensive treatment methods. So our backlog, we actually came down a little bit to about a $42 million backlog. But you see here our very poor roads have jumped quite a bit right here to about 29%. And if we go to the map, it becomes almost a little bit more clearer. So I'll move on to the network map. So all this red on the map is very poor, and a lot of these are the neighborhood roads that we haven't touched in quite a while. We would like to get to them, but we have a hard time even keeping up with our main roads. So yeah, a lot of these were roads that were in poor condition, but have, they've fallen down on the deterioration curve and gone into the very poor to serious range. So, and you can see this is our distribution between local roads, collectors, minor arterials, and principal arterials. So you can see we're doing a better job keeping our arterials up, and that's where you get the most complaints, you get the most higher traffic volumes. Do you want to ask a question, Jennifer?
I'm sorry, just to be oriented, like, could you tell me where Fearing is, just so I know where?
Oh, sure. Let's see. Here is Northampton Road. Here's that would be Amity, and Fearing is right there. So it's hard to, I can't zoom in on the
Thank you.
image,
Yeah, that's okay. That can see.
but
I
does
was
that
looking.
give you
Thank
sort
you.
of an orientation? Yeah. So this is Route 9 going through town, goes back out. This is Pelham Road, Main Street. Then you've got Northeast Street, Southeast Street, and this would be Sunderland Road. Montague Road's not on here because it's a state highway, so it doesn't actually show. We don't take care of that road. And then this would be the Pleasant Streets, the North Pleasant to South Pleasant to West Street.
And can you describe what defines local, collector, minor, arterial, and principal?
Oh, of course. So it's primarily based on volumes. So, the local roads are all the side streets where there's only like half a dozen to a couple dozen houses. And most of them are dead ends or cul-de-sacs, not all of them, but they don't see a whole lot of cut through traffic. They're mostly just the local traffic, the people that live there. Then you've got the collectors, and those might be the main road in a larger neighborhood that brings you to your side street. So that's what a collector street would be. And then you've got, I don't know that we don't really distinguish too hard between minor arterial and principal arterial, but the principal arterials might be more like the numbered routes or the main north-south routes. And then the minor arterials they see a pretty heavy volume too, but they're not necessarily the full-on through streets in town. So I think that covers the different those are the roadway classifications. So yeah, a lot of our neighborhood streets, a lot of our locals are falling, falling apart. Some of them haven't been paved since they were built, honestly. So, but we're trying to get there. So now that we have this map that's our assessment of all of town, move forward. They also produce an individual distress map. Now this is from 2021, so they have longitudinal and block cracking, roads that were crack sealed. They have little pothole flags and patches flags. Now this was useful in 2021, but most of those potholes have probably been patched. They do help us decide what to do with certain roads when we look at the distress map, and you can work that into sort of the decision tree if you want to. But yeah, that's just the different distresses mapped all around town. Moving on. So this is the big just data dump that they give us. We have 767 roads in town, and this order is completely random. I think it's just how they drove the route the first time they did it, and they follow the same route they did. So this is just in order of segment. So segment 1 through segment 776, and I just kind of had to abbreviate this table because couldn't fit the whole 700 roadway segments in one slide. But yeah, it gives you the street, the segment, the beginning street, the ending street, the PCI, and then you get a width, a length, and a total area. So that's just sort of the raw data that we get from this program. Then we move on to how do we decide on what methods to use for what roads in what conditions. And that's kind of a more complicated algorithm. This is a very simplified version of what we actually do. Oh, did I see a hand up?
Jason, I just wondered what determines a segment. A road isn't a segment, but segments are pieces of roads. It's not a big deal, but I'm just curious what makes a segment.
We just decided to break them up by side street.
Arbitrary.
So an intersecting side street. Occasionally, when we do a paving job and we don't begin or end at a side street, we will turn that into a segment because we didn't have enough money maybe to do the whole thing. So we just started here and ended there, and that was where our dollars ran out. So occasionally we'll have a segment that's sort of a little more randomly defined than by side streets, but most of them are defined by side streets. So you go from this street to that street, and that's one segment. So, something like North Pleasant Street probably has, I don't know, I'd probably venture a guess at like 100 segments to make up all of North Pleasant Street. So yeah, this is a very simplified example decision tree, where you take your streets, and the streets that are 0 to 40, you do like a full depth reconstruction. The streets that are 40 to 70, you might be able to get away with milling and overlaying, where you just scrape up a couple inches of asphalt and then put down a couple inches back. Full depth reclamation is where they just grind the whole street into gravel and you start over again. And then there's for 70 to 90, those are good roads. We just try to do crack seal, or if it's a little beyond a crack seal, we'll do sort of a advanced pavement preservation, which I'll get to later in the slideshow. And from 90 to 100, we can typically defer maintenance, or maybe if we see a crack developing here or there, we might send a crack seal team over there to keep it newer longer. Basically, you're just kind of investing in preventative maintenance.
And why do you care about cracks, Jason?
Oh, because once a crack forms in a road, that's just a place for water to get in. And as soon as the water gets in there during the winter, especially with our more recent winters where it's every day is a freeze thaw cycle, overnight the water gets in there and then it thaws out the next day, the snow melts into it, or you have another rain or snow event and it just destroys roads. So keeping the water out for as long as possible is the best way to just keep the road new. Just to keep it in a new good condition. So like I said, this is an example decision tree. We kind of break our streets into the different classifications, and we have different treatments for different classifications, because I can do an overlay on a local street and it'll last 10 to 15 years, where if I do an overlay on a prime example, West Bay Road, it's going to fall apart much faster because of the higher volumes and heavier traffic loading. So this is just a simplified version of the decision tree. We have like a 12 or 15, 12 or 16 branch decision tree for what our algorithm actually is. And the different roadway classifications also carry with them like a different unit cost. So for a local street with not too much involved, we can do a full depth reconstruction for about $100 a square yard. When we start to get to some of the bigger main streets where you've got bike lanes and sidewalks and lots of manholes and lots of driveways, that price can easily double, if not go more than that. So moving on from the decision tree. So yeah, then we run it through that algorithm, we run it through the decision tree, and it can spit out a repair suggestion table. And a couple of these right at the top, so they show you the PCI here, and then there's a repair priority, and that's kind of based on traffic volumes as well as PCI conditions. And these first two are right downtown. The repair priority is 100, and they easy $500,000 to reclaim and repave them. we're kind of putting a couple of these on hold. We're waiting on some of the downtown design guides to be determined through the planning department. I think they are working on them. They've had maybe a couple of public sessions. So they're working on getting a design guides for how we want the downtown area to look and what sort of, what sort of layouts do we want? What sort of, what do we want the downtown to look like? So a couple of these are on my coming paving list, but I think we can move on from this slide and I'll get into a little bit more detail. So this is just repair suggestions, and we take this, we look at it, we have to sort of hand pick a few of the ones out. Some of these also need, infrastructure like water, sewer, or drainage. Councilor Ryan, you have a question?
You probably will get to this, but I'm just curious, what determines, how do you calculate repair priority, that number? Is that something?
So we do a slightly heavier, we weight our decision tree a little bit higher for principal arterials, collectors, and our, just arterials and collectors. So it's like a 40-60 split. So we give like 60% more preference towards higher volume roads because that's where you're going to get your complaints. That's where the majority of traffic has to drive, and the majority of, if there's too many potholes, that's where you're going to get the most claims. Whereas, a local street with only a few houses on it, you're going to be driving slower. It's not as heavily trafficked. It's less of a priority. So that's kind of how we just put a tiny little extra weight on those principal arterials. And unfortunately, they also eat up a larger portion of the budget than the side streets. So that our budget goes pretty quick once you start doing the bigger roads. But it's more important. They have more volume, traffic volume. So that's kind of how we play it. So we can also do, more than just a table. You can also do a repair suggestion map. So that's the next slide here. And that kind of gives you a couple of the different methods we use. So this is, more than what we saw in that decision tree, whereas all the pink roads could use a mill and overlay. Anything in brown is something that we probably did within the last few years, so it's in pretty good shape. Some of the more local roads, we can get away with a 1-inch overlay. Collectors, maybe we do a shim and an overlay. So that just gives you repair suggestions townwide. We can't afford to do all of them, but that's kind of how we weed out what our priorities are and figure out what our coming year is. Now, another thing the program can do is some budget scenarios. So you can ask it questions like how much to keep our average PCI steady, or you can put in our actual budget. So, our annual Chapter 90 allotment has been 838,000 for the last since 2012. The town has occasionally contributed, 500,000 to $1 million. We did a $4 million bond in 2012 that got us a lot of roadway miles, but it was just kind of a blip, so it didn't move the needle very much. So yeah, typically on an average year we can do about 2 to 3 miles of roadway with our $1 to $1.5 million budget. And unfortunately, that is this. I put it into the budget scenario, and that's this low purple line here. So under our current average budget, we're going to lose about 10 PCI points about every 5 years. So we're starting here at a 62. In 2029, we're going to be around a 50. 2034, which is a far out look, we're going to be down to below a 40 PCI for townwide average. I did another budget scenario where if, pie in the sky, if we could do $3 million a year, that's this green line, and we can kind of maintain current PCI, but we start to fall off in future years, but it gives us a good, at least the first 5 years, we're doing pretty good. And then just a pie in the sky budget of $5 million a year. And that actually, improves our conditions over the next 5 years, and we're able to then maintain like a consistent level of good roads. So that's just some of the fun you can have with the budget scenarios. You can also just ask it questions like how, like this one, I used it and I said, maintain current average PCI of 62 for the next 5 years. And it spits out, you need about $3.6 million per year to maintain our current average PCI level. And then it gives you sort of a breakdown of which roads to do, which years to keep that average of 62. So that's just some of the cool things this program does. So, and then we'll move on to our worst roads. So these are our worst roads. This is all the roads, and it's 2 slides that are below a 30 PCI. So you can see some of them are right downtown, Pomeroy Lane, College Street. These are, pretty well-known ones that we hear from residents about. And you can see that the budget gets spent pretty quick. I mean, right about here, we're out of money doing just the first 4 on the list. But like I said, some of these are on hold, so we have a slightly different, we have to do some hand picking when we actually get down to the final budget. So that's the first slide of worst roads. Here's the second slide of worst roads in town, and ending with Lincoln Ave, which is just above a PCI of 30. It's got a 31. And that's just to tackle all of those would be 5 million, over almost $6 million to get everything under a 30 back into shape. So then I'll go into a little bit of paving history. Does anybody want me to pause here and ask questions about the sort of the program part? Or should I just keep going forward? Okay, I'll keep.
Yes, just keep going.
Okay, no problem. So this is work we've done in the last 5 years. Last year was a pretty prolific year. We had a big boost of CDBG money, about 2.3 million for the MassWorks grant on Belchertown Road. So that was a great infusion to our budget. We spent almost $4.5 million last year and got a lot done. The prior year, 2024, that was when we were working on the Pomeroy Roundabout and we were worried about the budget. So we only did a couple of roads and sort of saved some of our Chapter 90 money just in case we had to spend it to finish the roundabout. So that was a less busy year. We only spent about $500,000, but we got some good roads done. And yeah, so then let's see, 2023, we did about $2 million worth of paving, hit a lot of main roads and just a couple of side streets off of those main roads. It's easier to hit them if you're already in the neighborhood. It's easier to, the paving company will charge you a little less if they're already there, rather than having them bounce all over town all the time. 2022, we did a little under $1.5 million in paving. We got 4 miles, 3 miles. 2021 was not a great year. We only did a couple of roads, but we still spent $1 million. So the money doesn't get us as far as it used to. Asphalt prices fluctuate just like gas prices. So that's sort of our standard road repaving. Last year we did what we call advanced pavement preservation, and it's a Cape seal. So we did South Pleasant Street and West Street, which we had crack sealed for the previous 5 years, and it was almost getting to the point where you couldn't add any more crack seal without making it dangerously slippery, because crack seal material in the rain can sometimes be turned slick. So we decided we were going to do a Cape seal, and we did it on roads that were in relatively good condition, but we're at the precipice of like going downhill really fast. Like it's basically seal coating it so that the water stays out for another 7 to 12 years. So we chose roads that we had resurfaced within the last, 7 to 10 years, and did the Cape seal. And it was very cheap money, less than $1 million to invest in roads that were already in good shape, but were, on the verge of going into sort of a quick failure mode. So the Cape seal, this here on the right in this picture is a chip seal. And then the Cape seal puts sort of a liquefied asphalt. You'll see this machine is putting it down. It's almost like a liquid asphalt that goes over it and makes everything nice and smooth. I have another slide on the whole Cape seal process. This is kind of a method we kind of like for pavement preservation needs anyways. So the first step of the Cape Seal is they spray down an asphalt adhesive, like an asphalt emulsion, and then right behind it they have a uh, chip screed, which just sprinkles loose stone. Some forms are pre-coated with an asphalt, others are just raw stone. And so that's just the chip seal process. And then the second step, they let the chip seal cure for a week or two, and then they come through with the microsurface, and it just turns it into a much more acceptable sort of smoothness for travelers. We had a lot of comments when after we had finished the chip seal, people didn't like the surface, they didn't love the roughness of it, but at the same time it was still doing the job of sealing the road. So we might lean into those a little bit more in the future, some of these chip seals. And so that is Cape Seal. Oh, and then I did a sidewalk. I hadn't done this in the last couple of presentations, but we finally put together sort of a sidewalk history spreadsheet, and listed what sidewalks we've done, which years, and sort of how much they cost. Now, some of these are park projects that are way more involved than just a simple sidewalk, so it's kind of too hard to parse out the cost of the sidewalk versus the cost of the entire project. So, and a lot of it was, grant funds. So yeah, we did a couple of bus pull-offs on West Street. We still haven't finished those between Longmeadow and Potline. That'll be starting up next week, finishing this spring. We did the South Common, downtown Amherst. We did the North Common, which was a much larger project. So on some of the smaller ones, I break down the cost per square yard, but some of the bigger ones are just too difficult to break down a cost per square yard. The year before that, we did West Street between the roundabout and Crocker Farm Elementary. Did about 0.4 miles of road for, 150,000. The year before that, we did a pretty good list: Kellogg, Boltwood, North Pleasant, Gray Street, Mill Street, Taylor Street, 2022. So we've been averaging, between a half a mile and a mile of sidewalk every year for roughly the last 5 years. Sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. Oh, Councilor Ryan, yes.
Is it even possible to create a priority list for sidewalks? I know obviously we have one for roads and you've got an algorithm and so forth, but do we have one for sidewalks, and is it even conceivable?
It is conceivable. It's a lot more expensive than scanning the roads. The same company, Street Scan, has they have oh dang it, I always forget the name of they have the little segways that they have, that they can roll down every sidewalk in town, collect data, collect imagery, and then rank them. But I think we spend under 20,000 scanning the roads, and the sidewalk scan, I want to say they estimated somewhere around $50,000. So that was kind of a big hit to take out of our paving budget just to scan all the sidewalks in town. If we ever come across that kind of money and have a project we want to, it would be great to prioritize sidewalks. We sort of do a complaint-driven system at this point. We listen to some of the boards and committees, DAAC. Sometimes we hear from schools and some of the school parents on different routes to school, on sidewalks that are, not great and could be a lot better. Yeah, Bob?
Yeah, sidewalks are a little bit different than streets in that a lot of what you see is intrusion of roots from trees, from nearby trees. How do you handle that?
There's no great way to handle that, honestly. There are techniques called root intrusion prevention. They did that on the bike path when they repaved the Norwottuck Rail Trail. They installed what they called I think it was called like a root intrusion barrier. It's pretty expensive though. The easier way is to just try not to plant certain types of trees next to certain types of sidewalks. Pine trees are notoriously shallow rooted and will, create just horrible ripples in the sidewalk if they're growing right next to it.
Well, these are mature trees, so they were planted years ago. I mean,
but their roots still push up.
Yeah, yeah. I walk a lot in the neighborhood. I live on Tanglewood. I walk a lot in the
Mhm.
neighborhood,
Yeah.
and the sidewalks are in terrible shape.
They are. They're also considerably overgrown.
Yeah,
Um, I yeah, I'm in the same neighborhood. I've pushed my HOA to use some of their landscaping funds to cut back some of the sidewalks that homeowners are technically responsible for, but there seems to be a lot of uh, neglected homeowner uh, responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that doesn't help.
Right.
But yeah, tree roots are probably a sidewalk's worst enemy.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna move on, and so this is just sort of our paving history for the last 5 years. I'm gonna move on to future projects if that's all right with everyone. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So here's our future project list. We're gonna put out a 2-year bid within the next month or so. For road rehab and reconstruction. We've got a running preventative maintenance bid that we did a 3-year bid, so we can extend it a year. I think we're in our second year on that. So that's for mostly just crack sealing, but there's a couple other methods in there. Then we've got, projected water and sewer work that's going to impact roadways that we'll have to repave once we do the infrastructure repairs. We've got a couple of sidewalk projects proposed, and then we've got a couple other grant funded projects proposed. So next is this is going to be our upcoming pavement bid right here. So we're proposing over the next 2 years because it's about $5 million worth of work. Oh, Andrew, you have a question?
Yeah, actually, it sort of ties into what you're doing right now. Do you have problems finding contractors or scheduling for whatever alternatives to get the work done?
Um, UMass pays much higher bid prices than we do, and I'm not sure how that works out. But so, and we do have our our annual bid has been historically won 90% of the time by Warner Brothers. And they also do a lot of work for UMass. So anytime UMass calls, they jump on it. There's also problems. The state has a much bigger budget than us too, and um, they try to spend out all their budgets before July 1st. So we have a hard time getting Warner Brothers to come in if and when they're the successful bidder. We have a hard time getting them to come in before July because they're working on state highway projects or UMass projects that they have a higher priority because they pay better. And then so that's the only sort of one issue we have. The last couple of years we've had a couple of competitive bidders. Andrick is one that we've seen, and a couple of the other companies have recently changed hands, been bought up by larger companies. So Palmer Paving got bought by Northeast Paving, and who's the other one? And another one company got bought by a company called Peckham, which has a large operations in New York State, Maine, and New Hampshire. So we try to put out competitive bids. The tricky part is that Warner Brothers slash Allstates is very local. They can do rock bottom prices because they can kind of fit us in between other projects. So I mean, we don't really have a problem getting it done. It's most of our issues are not having enough money. We run out of funds pretty quickly. You see, we've got we don't have $5 million to do all this work with. So that's why we're stretching it out over 2 years and hoping we can squeeze some in and hoping that maybe the bids come in a little bit lower. I'm less optimistic about that with the rate of inflation and the price of oil and all that fun stuff that goes into the price of asphalt. But so this is our ideal list for now. If we had more money, we could do more, but we're limited to this, and this will take at least 2 years worth of our budget, if not more. And so a lot of these are sort of, we're putting them in the bid, but they may not get done in the same bid. We'll have to see what the bids come in as and drop roadways as appropriate. If you'll notice, the first one on the list is not one that was on a priority, but it is one that has deteriorated much faster than the sort of model curve. So West Bay Road, we overlaid it about 4 or 5 years ago, and it's the traffic there is just beating it up. And the traffic and the shade and the freeze thaw cycles. So that one is kind of on our priority list because we patch it one day and the volume and weight of traffic driving over it just beats the potholes back into it again and splashes the new asphalt out. So it's just a chronic maintenance headache. We have to do a more permanent fix to it because it's endlessly falling apart. And just we I think we've been out there probably 6 or 7 different times this year, and I get a call within a week after we've patched it, and they say it's back to what it was. So we really have to do more of a permanent fix over there, and that's the full depth reclamation with asphalt injection, and that gives us a nice sub base as well as a good, nice, smooth top. So that one is overdue. Pomeroy's been on been on a running list for a long time. We did about half of Pomeroy Lane in recent years, and I would like to finish the other half. It does involve redoing some sidewalks and adding some drainage, so it's a little more on the expensive side, but we definitely want to get around to it. South Pleasant and Main Street. Now this is kind of part of our North Common project. We redid the North Common, but we regraded the North Common. Now we need to make the road match. And so we're doing the entire intersection of Main Street and a short leg of South Pleasant Street to sort of finish off the whole North Common project. Then we've got College Street, the low end of College Street. That one's in really bad shape. We're constantly having to go out there and patch it. We kind of had to wait a little bit till Eversource finished doing what they were doing. They undergrounded a bunch of electric over there, so we put that one on hold for another year or two, and now it's really showing its age. We're gonna do half of Flat Hills, the shorter end from Market Hill to High Point Drive. That one's been pretty bad for a couple of years, and it's been on a list, but always has fallen off a couple of lists because we don't have the budget. We're going to do an overlay on Lincoln Ave, the piece between Northampton Road and Amity Street. That one has fallen apart pretty bad in the last couple of years. Southeast Street between Valley View Drive and the Norwotic Rail Trail. That is one we did a hold in place recycling, and we're not pleased with the results. So 7 years later, we're back over trying to take care of it before it really blows apart. And then South Pleasant Street between Snell and College Street, that we're just going to do a mill and overlay so that Amherst College can redo their crosswalks. We took out their crosswalks last year. They're brick and granite that were really kind of failing, and they're gonna do the same treatment we've been using downtown for their new crosswalks. It's a imprinted thermoplast crosswalk that looks like brick, and it mimics brick anyways, and it's much more durable. So, and then the bottom of this list is Hopbrook and Kestrel Lane, which are still technically private roads. And they have provided us with some private funding to try to get them up to, I'm going to loosely say, subdivision standards. Go ahead, Councilor Ryan, you have a question?
Just back to bricks for a second. They're very beautiful and lovely, but I guess it's the freeze thaw. Is that the main culprit that makes them?
Putting any kind of dissimilar materials next to each other in a roadway, it's a recipe for failure. We were not big fans of that style of crosswalk when they first were proposed, and I feel we've been justified and proven right.
Was that a design kind of thing? Was that pushed by a sort of design plan, or was it pushed from
That was our former downtown design guidelines, our street design guides.
Okay, thank you.
That's why they're back to the drawing board, and I think they've worked in this treatment, the thermoplast treatment, as our preferred. I know the Transportation Advisory Committee likes our new treatment better.
An example of that treatment is the crosswalk in front of the Jones Library, right?
Correct. Yeah, Jones Library. We did a couple down by Garcia's. Yeah, we've done a few throughout town.
The look, I like the look. The look is good, and it does seem not obviously not to deteriorate the way the
Yeah.
brick did. Yeah.
And UMass liked what we were doing with that too, and they've been copying it on some of their crosswalks as well. It's slightly different style.
And
But,
Jason, when
we're
you say
learning.
Amherst College will do the crosswalks, can you explain what that they are physically doing it? They're providing funds to do it. What does that mean?
I'm unclear if they're going to use our. We have a 3-year contract with a company called McNulty that does this process, and they're either going to provide funds for us to do it, or they're going to contract. They could probably contract with them separately and have them hire them themselves to do it. But it has to be on fresh asphalt. That's the only tricky part, is that road has started to delaminate pretty severely. You get these little 1.5 to 2 inch potholes because that was originally an overlay and that's now peeling off. So we're gonna catch that one before it goes really haywire. So yeah, so for Hopburg and Kestrel, we're gonna try something a little different. We're doing a 20% rubber chip seal, which is like I showed in that slide about the Cape seal. It's the first step of the Cape seal, but we're just going to leave that as the finished surface. We have to do a bunch of spot repairs on failed catch basins and whatnot to get that road up to par, and then hopefully get it towards being accepted as a town way. So that's our 2-year paving bid plan. That bid should go out within, like I said, within the next month or so. Our next slide is just our preventative slide. It's not very glamorous. It's just crack sealing. Most people don't even notice when they come and go. This company moves so fast. The company we have a 3-year bid with, they come in, they do about 5 days worth of work. It costs about $1 million. No, sorry, it costs about $100,000. But it's that preventative crack seal on streets that some of these are very recently paved, and we just want to keep them sealed. If there's any little cracks or crevices, got to keep the water out. So that's just our crack seal. We try to, we put $100,000 towards that as often as we can, to just try and keep our new streets new. And it's 50 cents per square yard as opposed to $100 per square yard for letting it go to full depth reconstruction. So it's cheap money, and it's ounce of prevention and as a pound of cure kind of thing. So next slide is our water and sewer work. So we've already done the water on Harvard, Canton, and Grove. It's not many people even know where those streets are. It's a tiny little loop off of North Whitney Street. But we had to replace the water main over there. It was an old 2-inch galvanized iron water main and was beyond its usable life. So they've got new water mains over there. This year we're going to do Kendrick Place, replace the water main there. That was part of the Mass DOT project that replaced our water main going down Northampton Road. So we want to finish Kendrick Place off Northampton Road, and then we're going to do Amity Street from University Drive to Blue Hills Road. That we're replacing a 100-year-old 6-inch cast iron water main, in preparation for the proposed roundabout down there. We want to make sure we don't want to put a roundabout over a 100-year-old water main only to have it blow up the day we do the ribbon cutting. So we're trying to get ahead of that one. That is our water work. Oh, Councilor Ryan, go ahead.
So with this kind of work, is there also I mean, you talk about 100-year-old mains. I assume you probably have a list of all the mains and how old they are. And is there a plan going forward over the next 10, 15, whatever years to systematically replace these? I get the impression that what happens often is that something breaks and then we fix it. Or occasionally a road is being done, and then you can since the road's being torn up, you can step in and replace, or but is there a plan for this as well that we watch or follow?
I mean, this is the current plan right here. We're trying to get rid of there's a new lead and copper rule. So anything that says galvanized iron on it has a high likelihood to possibly have leaded joints. And also it's a material that hasn't been used for galvanized iron, hasn't been used in water mains for at least 100 years. So we
Mhm.
know that it's well beyond its usable life, its designed lifespan. So we're looking at anything that's that age and has definitely aged out. But our budget for that is not great. So I mean, we're trying to replace as many as we can as as in as good of a time frame as possible, while at the same time we've got our treatment plants and our wastewater treatment plants
Right, right,
also
right.
having these same needs. So there's a lot of conflicting needs in the water and wastewater world, that are very tricky to keep balanced. But we try to pick away at them as best we can.
Mm, mm, mm.
Jennifer Taub, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, I'm looking, this is on the Amity Street, when that water and sewer work is done, will the street be closed during that period?
We'll probably have to close one lane.
Okay, for
So,
an extended period? I know, I won't
It'll
waylay.
be it'll be during construction hours. Yeah, the construction project that'll probably take at least a month or so. And it'll have a single lane closure. Working through the intersection is going to be very difficult. We're going to have to come up with sort of a detour plan for that. But we're gonna make it work. We've already talked to UMass. We know which dates their graduation stuff is. We're gonna start before graduation. Um, and we've already told the contractor there's a blackout week where they can't work there and they have to have it sort of buttoned up and nicely, passable. So
Yeah.
it'll just be during the days where the detours will be in place, and then at night they'll reopen.
Okay, so, and George and I will get a little heads up because it goes right through, bisects our districts.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
We'll
thanks.
put down announcements for it.
Okay,
We always
thank
do
you.
with any road projects that involve a closure.
Yeah.
We're always going to put out announcements hopefully at least a week in advance, if not the Friday before.
Okay, thank you. I know you're good at that.
So our next is our just sort of sidewalk replacement plan. We've got a short list this year. We're getting low on funds for sidewalk replacements. We're going to do Chestnut Street from Cottage Street to the middle school. That sidewalk's not in horrible shape, but it's below grade and it holds water all winter. So it's a skating rink all winter long. Um, and it's got some root issues that are starting to spring up. So we're gonna try and hit that one. Especially it's a school route.
Mm.
It's the several of the residents have complained that there's no good way to keep it from icing over. And it's they're right. There's no, it doesn't have positive drainage. So it's lower than the lawn here and lower than the road there. So we're really gonna try to get that repaved. It should be a pretty quick and easy job. We had one request that kind of made sense to me, that there's a sidewalk that runs up North Whitney, and it ends at house number 180, which is less than 100 feet before a conservation trail that leads right down to the middle school. So we had a request, I believe it was from a parent over there, that was like, can we just finish the sidewalk to the trailhead so that the kids can have a fully, safe walk to school? And it made sense. It's pretty cheap money. And so we're gonna try and finish that one out this year. And then we are working on a project to do sidewalk on West Street, where down near Mill Lane, there's an existing sidewalk that's like 100 feet off the road, and sort of it takes people away from their actual destination, which is oftentimes the bus stop. So we're gonna pull that sidewalk out and put the new sidewalk adjacent to the road. Yeah, Councilor Ryan, you've got a question?
Since we're on sidewalks and we're on things like close to my district, I've been told that when you're doing a sidewalk that has a serious grade, that's a real problem. There are ADA issues and so on. And what I'm thinking of course, is Amity Street, which we did some sidewalk there, which is great near the center of town. But for those on Blue Hills, Dana, Amity Place, and eventually when the new project gets built at the foot of the hill, that. But I'm told that it's just prohibitive. That when you have a grade like we have on Amity Street, we just can't. I don't know. The sidewalks are terrible, but the grade is a challenge.
Yeah, so you're allowed to go. There's one caveat to ADA regulations, where if a road, for a typical sidewalk, if the road is under 5%, you can't do a sidewalk less than 5% or greater than 5%. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
So you're
Mhm.
supposed to keep every sidewalk under 5% pitch, less than 2% cross slope. But there's one caveat to that rule that if the road is 10% grade, which Amity Street is on its steeper end, it's a
Right.
10 to 12 percent grade. So you can make the sidewalk match that, but at the crosswalks, you have to have a level landing. And so at the crosswalks, you have to go 2%. Now, if the road is 10% and you have to do a 5-foot flat spot at 2%, now you have to do a ramp with either railings or you have to do kind of one of those zigzag ramps like to get into buildings.
Mhm.
And then on Amity Street, it just gets so prohibitive. I think we'd need like 1,000 feet of retaining wall
Right, retaining wall.
up against people's property lines to either cut the grade or build up the grade, because one part it's uphill from the sidewalk to the house, and another part it's a pretty steep drop off from the sidewalk to the house. So yeah, it is very difficult to meet ADA regulations on roadways that are greater than even 5%. And
There
it's
is an appeal process though, or no? Is this like, this is just the way it is and take it or leave it, or there, I mean, yeah,
Guilford and I go back and forth on this.
okay,
There is a governing board, but they don't technically govern right of ways. So if you're building a ramp into a historic building,
right.
um, Architectural Access Board, AAB, can
Mhm.
grant you a waiver for
Waiver.
a ramp that's too steep. They don't technically have jurisdiction over public right of ways. But I feel like if you were to ask for a waiver from them, you could potentially get one,
Okay.
but I'm not sure how the process would work, or if, as Guilford says, that they don't necessarily have jurisdiction over public ways. So it's kind of there's a weird catch-22 there.
Right, yeah. Okay,
Build it not to ADA regs, you also open yourself up for lawsuits.
well, I'm famously known for having said in a council meeting, what's wrong with being sued? That's probably gonna be put on my tombstone, thanks to Scott Mersbach, but I did say it. What can I do, right? Thank you.
Okay, almost to the end here. This is just some of our grant funded projects. We've got East Street, which is the one-way section of Southeast Street across from Fort River School, has the old East Street School on it. From Main Street to Southeast Street, we got CDBG funding for infrastructure. So we're going to abandon and replace the water and sewer mains, which are both over 100 years old. So that's a project we already bid that. Taylor Davis was the low bidder, so we should be seeing that work start sometime in the near future. And then other CDBG funded projects is doing the sidewalks on North Pleasant Street from Fisher Street to Hobart Lane. We're doing the sidewalk on both sides. One side is going to get an 8-foot sort of multi-use path. That's the Puffton Village side. And then the opposite side, we're just going to remove and replace the existing sidewalk, which is in pretty rough shape. Has a lot of puddles, has a lot of, cracks and deformations and whatnot. So that's all with CDBG funds, Community Development Block Grant funds. And then we've got the MassWorks grant for the Amity Street roundabout at University Drive, which we're actively in the process of surveying and flagging wetlands and getting that to more of a final design. And hopefully we'll see some action on that after July.
Is that can also pick up a little bit of the section that is rough that goes towards the university from there?
Yeah, that'll be encompassed in it. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised UMass didn't bother to overlay that when they did. I think they thought the roundabout was coming sooner than it did. But yeah, that'll take care of that spot too. And then almost to the end here. Let's see, what's my last? Oh, here's a wish list. I know you guys want like a 5-year plan, but I can give you a 5 years or a $5 million plan. And these are other roads I'd love to do. They're also kind of high on the priority list. University Drive, we hope to do after the roundabout is complete. That road is definitely falling. Our piece of University Drive is definitely falling apart, and it will get much worse. Even just with the construction project going on and the construction traffic, it's going to get even worse before we have a chance to make it better. But so yeah, this is just sort of a $5 million wish list. If we get $1 million a year, we'll slowly check these off over the next 5 or 7 years. But that's just sort of a quick and dirty wish list. And then this is my last slide. Just gives this was we did the basketball courts at Mill River Park, and it was great to be able to capture all the different pieces of equipment. You've got all your different compaction equipment: little roller, big roller, medium roller. You've got your hand. That's a vibratory plate whacker here. Then you've got your dump truck hauling the asphalt, and the screed, which is the machine that places the asphalt. So just thought it was a good representative picture. I know I've used it in the last, probably at least the last slideshow, maybe the one before that. I think Andy's the only one that's seen all 3 of my slideshows as both select board member and council member. So that's all I got. Any questions, comments? I can go back to slides if people want to backtrack. But it definitely shows that I know everybody needs more funds in their budgets, but our road budget is also one of those needs. Yeah, I didn't see whose hand went up first. Jennifer Towne?
I'm sorry, actually, I think George's was up.
Go ahead,
Was it?
John.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
go
looked
ahead.
down.
So I just, so the streets, thank you very much for the presentation. It's fascinating. You did one before I was on the council that I listened to, and then later, a year later, sent it out to the residents in the district, because these are incredibly interesting and informative presentations. But if we see, there is a big pothole right at the intersection of Sunset and Fearing.
Mhm.
Is there any chance, that might be, would that have to be on the list to be done after all the lists that you just reviewed?
Well, individual potholes, we have a couple different ways to report those. We have a program called See Click Fix.
Right.
Log into the town's website. So that kind of stuff we can take care of on an individual basis, with a couple of different ways for our citizens to report them.
Okay, and that is, so the street, Fearing between Sunset and University, I believe, actually belongs to the university. That's not a
Correct.
town street. So if
Correct.
this pothole is just over the line into the town, then it's the town's, there's no chance that the university would help repair that?
Sometimes we end up overlapping. Like if UMass sends out a patch crew, they might tag it, but typically it should be our responsibility.
Okay.
We've had a couple instances where they have contracted a line painter who accidentally left campus and kept painting lines, so every once in a while we get bonuses like that.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead, Councilor Ryan.
So I wanted to ask you about See Click Fix and what your experience with it has been. I've had a fairly positive experience over the past 2 years, but from your perspective, does it help at all, or it's just, yeah.
It does. I mean, people like to vent in it a little overly. There's some keyboard warriors out there that get a little aggressive with it.
Okay, yeah.
But
okay.
as far as just having a list, if we get 5 complaints on a certain road, that's a good way to tell us to let's go
To get your attention
get
and
some pothole patch over there.
Okay.
So the guys basically they get either a stack of sheets or a list, and they head out, and that helps them kind of prioritize where they got to go next.
I do get responses back. That's my experience. Just that we've received it and we're working on it, whatever. And eventually when
Yeah.
it's settled, I get that back as well. So my experience as a resident over the last few years has been relatively positive, and
Yeah.
so I appreciate it. Yeah. I had a second question, but I'll come back. I get 2 hands up, so I'll come back.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Guilford or Paul? Who wants first?
I'll jump in just because I'm following up on that question. So I think it's see-click fixed. That's how I report things, and I think it's the best way to do it because otherwise, there's 2 points on that. One is if the DPW doesn't know a problem exists, whether it's a pothole, they can't fix it. The only way they get to know, other than a call, is through see-click fixing. It goes on their list. They have an enormously long list, but it gets captured. And Jason's right. Sometimes you'll see, oh, 3 other people have reported this, but it's the only way to really inform the DPW if there's a problem. That also goes for things like catch basins that are, or storm drains that are covered up with leaves and they're preventing.
Mhm.
So if they don't know there's a problem with those, because once you get out when it's dry, you don't see the puddle anymore. So I think it's an important tool for the DPW to be able to respond to complaints.
Yeah, I
Just-
agree.
Just a quick comment on see-click fix and any other means of reporting potholes or any other issues is we'll take a complaint and we'll put it in our to-do list, but we have stopped responding to anyone who uses profanity on the phone or on see-click fix. We pretty much take that request, we may take the information off of it, and then we don't respond to you. We kind of are taking the approach that Lowe's has. Please be nice to our employees. You don't have the right to berate them, dress them down, or make them feel like they're worse because they work for the community. So just so this my own PSA announcement going out there, and you can pass it around, is we're not going to respond to them. We'll take care of the issue, but we're not going to respond. And it's actually becoming more of a problem with our neighbors to the east. And I would it is becoming an issue. So, but we don't respond to those. So if people say they don't get responded to, you should ask them, well, how many profane words did you put in your see-click fix or in your phone call? And that's sort of the answer. If they say none, then yes, we need to respond to them. If they say they put a lot of profanity in it, then no, we're not going to respond to you. Sorry.
Have you thought about taking some entry point in the see-click fix and saying that we don't respond to inappropriate
Right,
language?
that would be a good step.
See-click fix actually does that too. They will actually flag things and send things back to people they really think are it's above and beyond. So they usually flag them out for us. They still send them to us.
Well, I appreciate hearing this from both of you. And when I do my district meetings, and I can use my newsletter as well. But I appreciate the fact that you have see-click fix and you use it. And I was not aware of this abuse, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised, given our current climate. And I'm sorry to hear that this is what's happening, but I will certainly share that word and I will spread it. And I'm sure my colleagues will do the same, because it can be a very useful tool, as Paul points out correctly. But what you're telling me also that some are abusing it in ways that are inappropriate. So we'll make sure that message gets out.
For what it's worth, at my dental office, they have a sign up there saying that, please don't use profanity or, shout at
Dentist office.
for dentists.
Well, when he gets into my mouth, sometimes I might say something.
Well, that may be, but
I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, yeah.
it's
Go.
everywhere.
Guilford, could you
definitely.
address, I mean, it's pothole season is that's how Jason started the presentation. Can you talk about how the town is able to, what the limits of filling potholes are given the weather and how we address all those demands?
So right now we're using a hot box for our pothole patching because the asphalt plants haven't opened. So we use
Andrick just opened.
Warner did.
Andrick.
Andrick, that's a little too far. So we wait for the local plants to open up. So we're using the patch hot box machine. We take either millings we have left over, or we take cold mix we buy from some of the other plants, and we heat that up and we use that. The box is only a 2-yard box, so we only have 2 yards of mix at a time to patch with, and then we go out and we patch. We cannot patch on a day like today. It's too wet to patch today. So this whole week is supposed to be rainy for the rest of the week and most of the next week. So we're kind of constrained that we can't patch in those days. We will try to get the really bad ones when it's cold, or not cold, but wet outside. We'll try to get those patched as best we can, but they're not going to last because of the wetness and dampness. So right now we're still in this mode of winter patching where we use just the hot box. When the asphalt plants open close to us, we'll send our trucks out and we'll get more asphalt, and we'll use 2 or 3 crews to go out and try to get all the patching caught up for a weekend for the summer. It's interesting. We're going into another freeze thaw cycle the next couple of days.
That's
Days
right.
will be warm
Yeah.
and nights will be below freezing. It's great for sugaring, but it's actually, I guess it's great for pothole growing too, but it's that's what we're doing right now.
Councilor Ryan?
Just quickly back to my other question about budget numbers. Jason, you presented a budget for 2 years of almost, I think it was like $5 million. And as you pointed out, between the state chapter 90 and what the town has currently been providing, you're going to be well short of that. My assumption is that you're hoping that CDBG monies and or grant funding could potentially make up the remainder. Is that kind of how you look at that?
It wouldn't be CDBG funding necessarily, because that has to be bid separately. They have separate bidding
Okay,
rules
all
and
right.
separate
That
the
wouldn't be that.
payroll rules for CDBG grant funds. But yeah, we look to either the town or, we're also, or Chapter 90, or, I know Chapter 90 did, I think we're getting maybe a
Slightly more.
40% bump from Chapter 90. I don't know that got finally voted through. Is that Maura Healy's budget
Yeah, so
proposal?
I think that's what her proposal is.
Yeah.
It still has to be voted by, right? And did I hear you correctly that, and I should know this, I'm sure, but that since 2012, the figure has basically stayed the same. It has not increased from the state.
Yes.
Chapter 90 money has been flat. Okay, right.
There's been a couple of bumps here and there with an extra, we get about 800,000. There's been one other year where they gave us another 300,000 or an extra 400,000.
That
So
was a one-time deal, and then it
a
went back
couple
to
of little
the,
glitch
yeah.
years where they were like,
Right.
here's some extra money. It was a really
Exactly
bad
right.
winter. Here's a little extra funding.
Thank you.
And Jason, you mentioned the water and sewer work, and when those roads get repaved, that's coming out of the water and sewer ratepayers, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's another way sort of to extend
Another
our
source of
paving.
weight.
Yeah.
Okay, you can help get some extra money.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, this has been very helpful. And Bob, you had one additional
I just
question?
wondered if we could get a copy of this presentation, because I'd like to use 1 or 2 slides in my next district meeting, just to show people, like the one slide about it'll take $5 million a year to kind of get our roads up to a steady state
Yeah.
Right.
condition. I mean, people need to know that.
Yeah.
Yes,
So we'll
yes.
get a copy of the presentation. We'll also take this recording and snip it so that you can share it out, because it'll be an hour-long presentation that we put. It's one of our most popular
Yes.
spots on YouTube.
Yeah.
Jason's our star.
Great, thank you.
I
We do a
was
weekly show.
just also sharing it with JCPC.
Yes, yes.
Jennifer?
Yeah, there was once some talk that we might also be able to get the contractors, because if towns got together and perhaps formed a consortium and went out to bid together, but could there also be some economies of scales if we were to do that? And what would that take?
Well, we bid ours out every year, and we actually get very good pricing. As Jason told you, the pricing that UMass pays is much more. So we do get good pricing as it is. Most of the bigger communities, Northampton, Greenfield, us, Springfield, Chicopee, all the ones farther south, they all bid themselves. They don't do a consortium bid. The consortiums are more like in Franklin County, where they will bid because their smaller communities will come together just to, I mean, they probably maybe only have 200, 300, well, they probably only have 100, $200,000 worth of work they do a year. So that actually helps them to make a bigger package. So there is really, we've seen nothing that would indicate bidding it with the rest of a bunch of other people that we get better pricing.
Thank you.
So it's like as a segue into a future agenda item on today's agenda, if we get to it. Actually, it's the next agenda item. Southeast Street in the area of Fort River School. See, I think that it's fairly good on the index, and that the work that the question is the traffic control as opposed to the condition of the road. Is that correct?
Yes.
So that the less it makes sense to at least consider that as a factor as we go forward, but thank you. So anything else for Jason?
But it might be worth, Andy, to follow up on your, like, if you want to talk about the engineering costs, because that's not captured anywhere on these paving money requests. And that would be a separate request to the council for funding for both the engineering plus the construction of whatever is decided on.
Yeah, that actually is the next agenda item, but I didn't know if Jason was going to cut out on us, and I don't want to keep him for longer.
I'd like to get back to work.
This is work, George.
Well, yeah, in a sense, I know, but
Not pleasure? Yeah.
instead of answering questions from, people who don't know very much, we could actually do so. Anyway, yeah.
So you have the choice to leave or stay, Jason. It's just what Andy's saying.
And you won't hurt our feelings either way, but we're very grateful. Thank you very much.
Yes, we are. Thank you so much. This was
Really, very good. Thank you.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We appreciate
Good
what you do.
afternoon.
Yeah.